Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the Italian Moschetto Modello 1891, conversationally known as the Cavalry Carbine, which, while not official, is a pretty fair description. Thankfully, it's a wee little thing, so it will easily fit in the light box. Weighing in just under 7 pounds, and with an overall length just over 3 feet, this is a very petite and handy carbine, if a little short in the buttstock. The 1891 Carcano action still takes the 6.5 by 52mm rimless cartridge, 6 of them on an end block, inserted all together into the magazine. Now before we get started, I'd like to remind all of you that today's episode is basically a gift to the entire internet, free for anyone to enjoy, but paid for by a select few who understand it can't be done without them. Consider helping them out and letting us both continue and improve. In addition to our patrons, we also receive some recurring help from my all-time favorite lubricant, Ballistol. They haven't given us any parameters on how we have to thank them, so we opted to just earnestly tell you all how this gun oil is the safest and most proven for your collectibles. But don't take my word for it.
Riles says, got Ballistol when I found out about the safe ingredients it's made with from this channel. Love to support a company that supports this channel. Gidor says, being in Germany, I have no functioning guns. I have long used Ballistol as a lubricant and preservative for many tasks around the house, cars, outdoor model trains, etc. Ed said, Ballistol fixed his elbow. It really is a do-all.
Now, last episode, we covered the development, adoption, and Great War service history of the Italian Model 1891 long rifle, the Carcano. Obviously, today we'll be exploring its smaller descendants, but in order to get that properly underway, we're going to have to rewind just a bit. This is the Vetterli Modello 1870 single-shot black powder bolt-action rifle. This was, of course, intended for infantry. Its extreme length was an aid in line fire, and when fitted with a bayonet, made a serviceable pike. Of course, an army is not made up exclusively of infantry. For those on horseback, the Moschetto da Cavalleria was developed. Most armies at the time didn't favor a bayonet at all for their cavalry. But the Kingdom of Italy differed. They not only had a long socket-style bayonet, they also kept it attached to the carbine, usually flipped backwards and tucked into a channel set in the forestock. For various other troops not in need of a long rifle, they developed the Moschetto da Truppa Speciale. This was more of a short rifle with a length in between the carbine and long rifle. Intended troops included the artillery, engineers, logistics, and later NCOs. I don't think I'm giving too much away when I say we'll see these concepts repeated very shortly. For the cavalry in particular, though, by the time the 1891 Carcano was adopted, the matter of a new carbine was somewhat acute. When the infantry swapped from their muzzle loaders to the 1867 Carcano needle fire, the cavalry were made to wait. They ultimately ended up skipping straight to the single-shot Vetterli. When the infantry swapped again to the magazine-fed Vetterli rifles, the cavalry once more had to wait, staying with the single shots all the way until 1893. As you might recall, that's when production of the 1891 Carcano rifles finally got spun up. With the long guns on the way, the Italian army could now turn its attention to the carbine question. Always in favor of keeping things light, they opted to make it as small as possible, keeping the already diminutive proportions of that prior 1870 carbine. This was possible despite concerns about lower muzzle velocity, shorter range, worse accuracy, and poor handling. Because the primary arm of cavalry was the sword. The carbine was just intended for dismounted use, a sort of early personal defense weapon, or a weapon of opportunity not meant to impede mobility. Happily, use of the standard rifle cartridge was possible. Recoil wasn't that much worse, and accuracy and range were acceptable. The muzzle flash was a bit much, but cavalry didn't engage in line fire, so it's not a big deal because it's not going off near somebody else's ears. Outside of those obvious points, I actually don't have much in the way of documentation of what was trialed or why it was selected. All I can say is that the commission presented their final version on June 9th of 1893. It was accepted and announced July 15th as the Moschetto Modello 91. I thankfully have an example of the final product here, so let's just go down the list together. Alright, we have a lot smaller of a long arm. Let me go ahead and get up towards the front because that's really where the wackiest stuff is happening. Pressed onto the front of the barrel and then attached to what is essentially our sight base is a bayonet two-position lug setup. It's operated by pulling back on this spring-loaded slider that's on the bayonet itself, then flipping that guy around without stabbing myself, and then click right into place. Springs and holds and gives us a tri-section spike of fairly decent length. Let me see if I can back this out. Yeah, that's a good ouchie. That's about half again the length of the carbine itself. Okay, you know what? I'll take it. It doesn't look that intimidating, but I'm going to tell you, I don't want to get poked by that. So we'll just fold that back on up, and it'll click back in place where it's inletted into the bottom of the stock. Our front barrel band, which is only halfway down the rifle, also includes a sling swivel. As a matter of fact, there's a ferrule on there to keep it nice and slick. It's of course screwed into place. Our rear sights are just a tinier clone of the rifle sights. Folded all the way forward for 300 meters, all the way back for 450. The first click up is actually, it's actually where I was. There's 450. First click up is 600, and then we can go all the way up to 1500. Now you may notice mine are actually a little bit loose, and that's worrying because these guys were so hand fit at the time and never really updated to that rifle standard we talked about last time. So it actually still retains the 2 screws on the side of the sight that are set into the tabs on that barrel. If those tabs give way, fitting a new sight will be a nightmare. I'm going to take a screwdriver to this and hopefully it just tightens on up. Our lower sling swivel is an inlet into the stock and a crossbar with, again, a rotating ferrule. This is actually a rather nice setup and is, of course, just gives us a side-slung carbine versus the underslung rifle. At the back is a butt trap. This is most easily accessed with a case rim. So if we just tab it up under there and give it a good little hook, we're in. Now inside is actually a 2-piece cleaning rod set because we can no longer set a cleaning rod up under the front of the stock because of our bayonet. All this action and magazine, they're the same as the rifle, except for the fact that the bolt handle's been turned down. Internally, the barrel is also progressively twisted rifling, although the rate of twist is different from the long arm. Now, since this action is the same as before, there's no need for another animation. We can just get this straight into Mae's hands for a demonstration. Undisputed handiest rifle of World War I. No competition. This Moschetto was initially produced in just one factory, the Royal Arsenal of Brescia, which had been formed up in 1891 by conjoining facilities in Brescia and Valtrompia. Various production happened in the brand new Gardone weapons factory. This whole Brescia works started off with 1891 long rifles, but quickly shifted focus to the carbine once it was available. Now, of course, this little guy was first issued to the cavalry. They were also issued to the Royal Carabinieri, who had previously had their own unique carbine during the Vetterli years. Within just 1 year, this carbine was already at the center of a potential scandal, though. The Italian government was keeping the new 1891's top secret, especially the progressive twist rifling. So imagine their surprise when the new Moschetto was offered up for sale in the local newspaper. The matter was tracked to Brescia, where local smiths had pocketed various, likely rejected parts and paired them with their own barrels, thankfully not progressively twisted. This was a nuisance, but no big deal, until they found that several barrels, actual military barrels, had leaked from the tourney arsenal, sold off as scrap. While the unknowing buyers weren't punished, over a dozen government gunsmiths and workers were actually arrested. Alright, that's the cavalry taken care of. What about the special troops? By 1891, these, by the way, would be something like the mountain artillery, along with artillery drivers, engineers, and the like. While not immediate, the War Ministry did eventually delve into the matter. Evidence suggests that they planned another carbine, same length as the cavalry model, but accepting the same bayonet as the long rifle. It also seems to have started life with a straight bolt handle. However, before adoption, it actually morphed a bit into, well, frankly, this, the Moschetto Modello 1891 per Truppa Speciali. Let's get this into the lightbox. Our overall length is just the same as our previous cavalry model. However, our weight seems to have slimmed up just a bit. We have a magazine capacity of 6.5 by 52mm cartridges. That's no surprise, as this is a standard end block clip feeding Carcano. Really, the differences are all at the front of the gun. Officially announced January 6th of 1900, it seems it had been in production since 1898. I'm unsure if that's because the paperwork was delayed, or perhaps there was some initial version, likely out for troop trials, that was reworked since it was so similar to the final model anyway. Might as well just go ahead and do the last little configurations and get what we need. That, however, is just speculation on my part. Once more, we can learn the most about the whys of this particular carbine by taking a closer look. Alright, our little TS is the same length as that earlier cavalry carbine, and as a matter of fact, it uses the same sights, rifling, and other features, except for some differences that are all located at the front. So we'll start at the rear, of course. The little bit of difference back here is the fact that we're underslung and do not have the side sling at all. We also have no butt trap because we can fit a cleaning rod at the front of the gun. If we come forward, the action is exactly the same as the rifle and the carbine, and insofar as the carbine, it also has a turn-down bolt handle. The bolts would have seen the same updates as those rifles at those times, including changes to extractors, and you get the rest. The rear sight is again the same as the previous carbine, and right in front of it is our big difference. This is our full-length handguard that goes all the way right to the near end of the muzzle with enough relief to just set our bayonet, which is actually on a unique lug. Let's get a better look at that. Sadly, I don't have one of the TS bayonets here. They've become quite rare now that so many of the rifles have come in and yet so few of the bayonets, but we can imagine, and I can use a little graphic in a second, but the idea is instead of just sort of socketing on from the side, you would place the muzzle ring around the muzzle, and there's actually two tabs here to prevent it from going too far. It holds it in the right spot. From there, you twist it over to click onto this guy right here, which is actually attached to the front band by a cross screw, and it's just sort of like a little shoe that is hung underneath, although of course it can't rock because it's fitted just right to the contours of this tapering front barrel band. Now, there is, by the way, our other sling swivel position at the front. We are underslung. And just while we're looking at everything, we'll see that we have an integral front sight base that is, again, drift adjustable, and we have our cleaning rod that is threaded so that we can get in there and work on our gun. Although, what I do like about these guys, if I can get this out, is the fact that they're not threaded at the base all the way inside that channel in the forestock, and instead that threading is right here up front. I always find that to be much nicer than when they have it at the rear, which inevitably by the time I get these guns has been jammed up and failed for a long time. It is impossible to fish out and repair versus just working on, well, a front band that's visible to you right here at the front of the gun. Now, the handguard itself is a little interesting because this is a very early pattern. It has two rivets and a piece of sort of spring steel that lips up under that barrel band. Let me see if I can get that out for you. By the way, there's our little shoe that I just removed by pulling out the screw. You can see from the tab on there that it is one directional, and you must put it in the correct way in terms of rotation. I'm sorry I don't have one to show you today. Now, if we take this front band off, let me go ahead and give that a little tap. We'll see that our tab has appeared. It's just a little lip of metal, and let me get the rear sight from holding that. There we go. It's just a little bit of metal that's been fitted up under the handguard. This is exactly how the rifles were done previously, and were eventually changed over to what we saw last episode, and in this episode we're going to eventually see this change as well. Now, as for why the bayonet was required to rotate into place instead of socketing, I assume it has something to do with extra strength, but I'm not really sure what test or circumstances led them to believe that they needed to do whatever the heck this was. So, with that much covered, let's see how it shoots. Once again, a sincerely portable firearm, if a little short in the buttstock for someone of my size. Now, to be frank with you, ignoring the fittings, these are basically the same. Same barrels, sights, rifling, action, etc. That's actually an improvement over the old system, where the cavalry and TS options made for different lots of barrels. Also, ditching the Carabinieri was nice. Well, mostly ditching it. Starting in 1899, a very small number of Royal Palace Guard Carabinieri Reale carbines were produced on the 1891 action. Strangely, these retained their socket bayonets, likely because of their mostly ceremonial duties. Like the long rifle, both carbines were subjected to various updates. When the cartridge powder was changed from ballistite to solenoid, testing revealed that the carbines were more affected than the long gun. So in 1903, orders went out to lower the front sight by about half a millimeter. Both carbines were also updated with the latest in extractor technology. Just review our long rifle episode for when and why these changed. This saw things through until the start of the Great War. Recall, Italy didn't join the conflict at the start. Period documents reveal a January 1st, 1915 inventory of 95,000 cavalry-style carbines and 76,200 TS's. This was a drop in the bucket compared to the 900,000 infantry rifles available at the time, but as we'll soon see, the short guns would become a lot more popular. As we've seen with other nations, much of the Great War fighting happened at ranges much shorter than anyone had expected when developing their rifles and their cartridges. Turns out these carbines were reaching out far enough and were much easier on maneuvering, consumed fewer raw materials in production, and placed less weight on the soldier himself. Over the course of the war, issue of both carbines was expanded. Bicycle troops, artillery, more and more engineering troops, Alpine supply, and of course, naval units as well. For the cavalry version in particular, there was a growing problem, with many of the formerly mounted troops being sent out on foot into the front lines. People were, frankly, burning their little fingers due to the lack of a handguard. So, they added one in June of 1916. Check me out, I have a handguard. It's not very big, but it's enough to put my hand on it. Now, this is fitted like the TS at the rear, where it's lipped up under the rear sight, and at the front, though, we've added, well, honestly, a fairly simple piece of metal. It's just a tab bent up over that front handguard. It doesn't make for the firmest fit, but it's not going anywhere, and it's very hard to lose. This is honestly a plus, as awkward as it may seem. The earliest version of this would be a groove cut in the band and a separate tab fitted. This example, however, is new made. The entire concept of the tab seems to have been borrowed from an actually earlier February of 1916 decision to modify the TS. We can see the final form of one of those here, a TS-style front end with a tab off the front instead of the old rivets sitting up under the barrel band. Those rivets, of course, were causing cracking because they were set right in that grain boundary and wanted to separate everything. This is a lot stronger and, frankly, a lot easier to produce. Handguard secured, there was also a problem developing with this bayonet. The pinch system was fine when the cavalry almost never used them, but apparently they were gumming up and working poorly in actual warfare conditions. This led to not one, but two separate updates. The first was provided specifically to the cavalry. Just as a review, this was our original type: pull, rotate, click, and you're ready to go. The first and field replacement looked like this, a simple wing nut bolted on the side of the front sight assembly. Not ideal, but it did work in a pinch. The true universal solution came in February of 1916 in the form of this, an unusual lever on the right side that you flip down in order to release the bayonet, which can be pulled back, pushed around, pushed forward, although see my lever moved, pushed forward, and then the lever turned up. As you can tell, this is not a perfect solution, but apparently it's a much more secure and accessible one than the pinch, which was likely gumming up and perhaps even having its sort of spring and plunger jammed up as I've seen on other guns before. This is, well, it's something. It's a lot more hand motion though, isn't it? Like, we really gotta like 1, 2, 3, and then in theory 4, but that just walked, so 5/4, and then 5/6. So as if everything goes smoothly, 5 motions. Way later in 1936, we'd finally get this little button, or at least the announcement of this little button. Push it and pull on back on the bayonet, flip it over, push it forward, and you're ready to rock and roll. To fold it away, push it again, pull out, and click it on like that. Conversion to the new button was to be undertaken as circumstances allowed. The whole thing seems to have been fairly ad hoc during the war, though arms that remained in service were largely updated into World War II. Frankly, the old pinch or lever style locks were hard to find in the current US surplus market until very recent imports. I'm actually kind of curious where they were stored and how they managed to miss all those updates. These improvements made the cavalry model in particular a favorite of the later war RDD or stormtroops, who favored its light weight and short length for close-in fighting. Brescia's production was halted in early 1919. By this time, they had produced roughly 286,000 cavalry-style carbines and 590,000 Truppa Speciales, which had actually proven to be more useful during the course of the war. Those of you who know World War II understand that this would not be the end of either of these carbines. However, the models to come have some uniqueness to them and their story that requires a separate episode some other day. I will say, however, the next model in the TS line was built to share parts with the long rifle, easing production costs and parts supply. So a pressed-on front sight, rifle-style barrel band, and handguard. It also swapped over to the long rifle's same bayonet. This pattern was actually announced in 1920 for all future production, though by then, new production was halted. In many cases, the original band was kept, and a rifle-style bayonet lug brazed in place. But these changes were actually more the exception than the rule until some years later. Early collectors pegged this as the model 1891-28 because they believed it was introduced with a resumption of production in 1928. I think 1920 might be more fair, but it's frankly up to y'all. The Italians just considered it the TS. It's worth noting that there is evidence that during the Great War, under pressure of special TS bayonet shortages, TS carbines were already being modified to accept the rifle bayonet. They didn't get a separate band or any of that stuff, they just had the old one removed and a rifle style brazed in place so they could fit the rifle bayonet. Unfortunately, I don't know of any documentation on exactly when or how many of those were made. Now, in addition to the post-war additions of various rifle bits, the TS also finally saw a long overdue improvement. All the way back in 1907, the Mountain Artillery had complained that the underslung TS wasn't an ideal configuration. At the time, they were trained to keep their carbines on their backs while working the guns. This positioned the new magazine where it repeatedly bopped right along the lower ribs, giving a very painful cumulative effect. They requested a side-slung variation. However, while this was being investigated, their own inspectorate opted to just change the doctrine so that rifles were left stacked nearby instead of over the shoulder the whole time. So the matter was dropped. It appears some might have been modified during the war. In 1921, however, the side sling finally made it officially to the TS. These were in the form of an inlet and crossbar in the rear and a fixed loop bolted into the forestock. The original underside sling swivel relief was filled in, and the forward sling swivel ground off. This was initially exclusively for the artillery, however it soon expanded to cyclists and others, meaning a better solution was needed. In 1929, orders came to equip each carbine with both side and underside slings. So for the remainder of their service, that became the norm, making it a simple matter to issue any TS where it was needed. Alright, I know you might have more questions about the later TS and cavalry carbines, but that's going to have to wait for another day and another war. With all this history locked in, I do want to discuss the Carcano 1891 as a whole, in the context of its competitors. At the time of its adoption, the Carcano was actually fairly advanced, though it suffers from a number of issues that are frankly common amongst its peers. Risks of double feed, poor extraction, rudimentary gas mitigation, but it did get a lot right. Quick loading, lightweight, and overall safe. Its 6.5mm cartridge also opened the gates to a number of others around the world. Romania, Sweden, who dragged Norway, the Netherlands, Japan, Greece, and Portugal would follow, though each had their own twist. Unfortunately, the 1891 cartridge didn't keep its edge. The choice of going smaller and faster did have an offsetting cost on potential performance. The larger calibers would soon benefit from the pointed boat-tailed Spitzer bullet, which gave them 6.5-like trajectory and still plenty of power. While a 6.5 could and in many cases was Spitzered, the benefit was less acute. Italy uniquely chose not to make this decision. The benefit was outweighed by the literal cost and potential confusion of introducing such a cartridge. You'd have to redo all of your sights, have 2 types of ammo out for a while, yada yada. They fairly quickly realized that the round nose was good enough. Well, at least until they were ready to adopt an entirely different cartridge, which we'll cover another day. The progressive twist bore was interesting and resolved the problem at hand at the time. However, other countries faced the same and resolved it more effectively, with proper bullet design accounting for the compression expansion when fired, and they also adjusted their powders to prevent the flash erosion. Italy actually did do the latter, later on, like we saw, to a much greater effect than the complicated rifling. Honestly, simplicity of manufacture was still one of its greatest features. It was a rifle that Italy could afford to make and had the capacity to produce in large volumes. It was also modern enough to struggle through both world wars. As it turns out, a rifle, some 10 or 20% better or worse than another, wasn't a make-or-break deal in global warfare. I'll also point out that compared to the Austrian Mannlicher rifle of 1895, it was in no way behind. Both used Mannlicher systems with exposed magazines, but the Carcano could load in either direction. The clip also held 6 rounds to the Austrian 5. The Italian infantry carried 168 rounds, as easily as the Austrian did 100. The Italian cartridge was rimless, so easier to feed through the emerging machine guns, but the Austrian's was more stable and slapped harder. Neither rifle has a bolt hold open on empty, though the Austrian does accept a single round tossed into the follower, whereas the Carcano tends to choke without its clip. Weight between the two and length was actually comparable, though I can guarantee the Mannlicher was more complex to manufacture. I honestly couldn't say between the two which is the clear winner in all circumstances. So that alone tells you Italy must have been on the right track since that was their main competitor. Alright, let's wrap this up. Salvatore Carcano retired from service in 1896. He passed away in Turin in 1903. I'm sure you'd be surprised to know that his rifle soldiered on throughout the 1940s. Alright, with all of this resolved, let's return our attention to these carbines, because at this point Mae's shot her way through just about every rifle and carbine of the Great War, and that's going to give her a much better picture of how to tell us what it means to shoot these wee Carcanos. Alright, once more we have Mae.
Hello.
And plenty of room for these little guys.
Yeah, we do have also a lot of them.
Yeah, we have the Moschetto Modello 1891.
Yes.
Which did on occasion get referred to as for cavalry. Not officially, but you do see it in quasi-government documents and references.
It's true.
And then people will complain, it's not actually cavalry, it's the Moschetto, whatever. I think just for the purposes of casually referring to the carbine, calling it the cavalry is fine. We know that it was issued beyond that.
Sure.
I do think it's an easier shorthand than trying to remember, well, this one you don't say anything, and this one you do say TS. Mm-hmm. So I'm fine calling the cavalry.
And TS was Trooper Special, right?
Right.
Okay.
So let me get the cavalry in your hand, actually.
Thank you.
One more time out.
Very handy by comparison.
Yeah, let's get some impressions going. Give me the ergos.
Okay. Well, we've just come off of, I presumably just come off the 1891 long rifle.
Yes, we have one here.
Yes, we do.
It's very long.
Definitely very long.
And
that
heavy.
is an infantry rifle right there. Okay. And then you hand me this and I go, wow, this is just so handy and light by comparison. I can throw this on my back, on my horse, on my donkey, whatever I have, and I can go.
They kind of went nuts.
It's crazy.
When we talk about carbines of that era, this is really short.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's ridiculous. And the fact that I also don't have all the wood going up to the front of the barrel is actually kind of crazy too. I have a fold out bayonet.
Yeah, half
That's
stock.
very unusual.
Folding bayonet, even with the folding bayonet, we've shot folding bayonet rifles on other episodes.
Sure.
Type 44.
I'm glad you thought of that because my brain went to SKS and I went, oh, maybe that's too late.
The Type 44 with its sort of big lug and big flat bayonet added a fair bit of weight compared to like a Type 38 carbine.
Yeah, it does. This is just, that bayonet is ridiculously light.
I honestly don't know how much the bayonet weighs. Now I kind of want to take it apart and weigh it.
I'd be curious.
Because it's not adding a lot.
Absolutely not, no. I mean, but it does add a lot of length to it once you actually pull it out. Let me actually pull it out once I get it there. Okay.
No, it's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's a pretty solid amount of length to it.
It's a very odd angle, but it's very impressive.
Yeah. And I wish the bayonet actually really were thicker, but I guess then that adds the weight to it. I don't know why, but this seems like it's delicate almost.
Yeah, while that bayonet's out, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Here, let me see.
I was trying to pinch myself.
Do you find this intimidating?
No. No, it seems delicate.
Now, if I were to
It
actually...
doesn't seem like a tool. I don't actually, weirdly, it's a bayonet that I'm looking at thinking, can I use that even more than just for stabbing?
Right. So psychologically, it's not that intimidating.
No.
If you stop and imagine someone actually violently piercing you with this thing.
That seems horrifying. It's very long.
Yeah. It's sharp and it's long and it's thick enough to really mess you up.
Oh, yeah. No, it's going to take me out.
I have the same problem, though. I look at it and I go, huh, it's crooked. It's little. And then I actually stop and if you took this off this gun and just had it in your hand and just ran at somebody with it, I'd be like, I would shoot them.
Right.
I do not want to be poked by this.
No, absolutely not.
And I wonder what it is about this gun that makes you underestimate it like that.
Or makes you just find it underwhelming.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
Gorilla Brain doesn't get it, and then I stop and reframe it in my head, and Gorilla Brain gets it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. But, here, let me give you that back.
Thank you.
Maybe the problem is the rifle as a whole, to me, cute.
It is. It's adorable. It's cute. It's light. It's handy. It's the toteable gun for the soldier on the go. That's honestly what I keep thinking. I can't stop thinking about how to market this. Essentially, just throw it into your knapsack and just get on going, bud.
Now, last time we talked all about the Carcano action.
Right.
The only difference between that and this is the turn down bolt handle. So
cool. So everything's the same.
6-round rapid feeding end block, but vulnerable at the bottom.
Yep. Still not seeing a clip cover.
Creaky, grindy bolt. Actually, let's try the bolt.
Oh, good. It's still just as creaky and grindy.
Well, that one falls on its own, at least.
Yeah, and the extractor is different on this one.
Well, yeah, that's the updated extractor. Yeah. But any better on the bolt?
I mean, at least it's turned down, so it's throwing me at the trigger, which it kind of does because there's a lope. The thing is, there's actually like a lopiness to this bolt in particular. I have to put extra force to push this one down. It actually throws me at the trigger faster.
So what you're feeling there actually is something that we couldn't show very well in our animation, but the Carcano has good primary extraction because of it has a shaped raceway, and the lugs are getting turned into that last little bit, and that's that sort of whoop at the end. And then when you go to pull it up, it's doing the same thing. It's yanking out as it comes over center.
Okay.
And it's getting good primary extraction.
Okay.
Usually when we saw like our Type 38 Arisaka, because we kind of keep comparing it to that, we saw that sort of shape at the back of the receiver where the bolt handle was turning in. Whereas in this case, we're getting it right off the lugs.
Okay.
So
I mean, better.
Yeah.
Not bad.
But anyway, I'm sorry. It's the same general action, same general rear sight, same.
Well,
it's just
it's
shorter.
a shrunk down. It's adorable now.
But does the notch look any smaller? No.
Actually, weirdly, the notch is taller. They somehow made it taller, which is ridiculous. And the front sight, very teeny.
Yeah.
And it kind of matches with the whole tininess of the gun now.
Now, without imagining shooting this thing,
Right.
let's say you haven't even handled it in terms of opening or closing the bolt, loading the ammo, aiming, firing.
Okay, so I'm seeing on a rack or something, right?
No, you've picked it up.
Oh, okay.
Like, you're at a store.
Okay.
And you can't really do any... Well, you're a store and they zip tied it shut.
Okay.
Okay. Is there... Just on this data alone, name a gun you would rather carry from before 1914 on a 10-mile hike.
Before 1914?
Yeah. Magazine repeating smokeless rifle. Struggling, aren't you?
Maybe the 1908. Can I take that?
Which one's that?
The
Is it the Serbian carbine?
Yeah.
Is that actually lighter than this, though? I don't know that it's actually lighter.
Not lighter. But it sure is nicer condition. It'll look prettier.
But I'm talking about you're not going to fire a shot. You just have to go for a hike. Like, the game with the hike is the least amount of weight.
I'm just trying to think of one that might be more useful, but it actually is kind of really useful that not only is it a very toteable carbine, it has a bayonet flip out. So it kind of has the extra bits already with it that not necessarily shorter, smaller rifles out here would come with.
I can think of one that is, like, possible, but, you know, it used to be on the wall behind you. It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
We actually have a Dutch cavalry carbine, which is a half stock with no folding bayonet. Just like this. You know what I mean? It's the same gun, only the older Gewehr 88
But then
style
it doesn't
safety.
have a folding bayonet. It's just kind of
Yeah,
lacking.
but we're talking about weight and hiking, right?
I mean, I'm also thinking on the hike that the bayonet could come in handy. What if I come across a bear?
Well, I mean, well, I guess they later made socket bayonets for this, but anyway, the the point being though is
it's a struggle no matter what to think of a thing.
Yes.
To think of what else to take other than this.
and of guns available to collectors, you know,
Right.
cheaply and easily. This is like
Carcanos. Goodness gracious, out there. You can go to everywhere and find practically Carcanos still, you know, just for pennies.
Yes, but it's something that you can just go out and buy. This is like the handiest of the handy. I genuinely love these. Okay, so initial impressions aside, let's get up in your shoulder.
Okay. What about?
How's that length of pull?
It kind of feels almost like it's. I'm glad you mentioned that because my brain slipped on it for a second. It kind of feels like it's one of those child Carcanos, you know, the
little kids.
Yeah, little kid ones that
Those are even
real.
worse.
Yeah, but it kind of almost feels like that, where I'm like, did Sears make this as like the, you know, Sears special or something, where it was for little Timmy to learn how to play?
What happens if you crook it in your arm like that? That's not terrible, actually.
That's not terrible, but
The rifle is about an inch or two short for me, but not terrible. Let me see that guy.
it's a little awkward.
Let's see it. Although my shirt cuff is really helping it. Let's try this.
Yeah. You're all the way to the front of the dang mag. That's impressive.
I can almost touch down on the front of the mag, whereas on the rifle I was like down here. You know what I mean?
Still
a little
too
bit
short.
Too. This is like 6 inches, 7 inches too short for me.
Oh man, maybe Kristen should try one of these.
Yeah, she has very small arms.
But that is actually quite awkward. I'm not even kidding. Everything about this just feels like it's been condensed in a really short sort of way.
It's like a youth rifle.
Yeah, it is for the youth.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's pretty much this in a nutshell. I mean, we have different
Variations.
carbines here. Well, actually, you say variations, but if I'm not mistaken, between this particular cavalry version, that one, it's pretty much just how the bayonet flips out.
Well, that's the key difference between these two, but also they added the handguard. This one represents sort of what was going on in the war.
What was the order of the actual, the different styles of bayonet?
That's the first.
This is the first one, right?
Right.
That's the second one?
So deploy that one real quick. Let's just go for it. Okay.
It locks in, it snaps over as long as you put force. I don't want to pinch myself.
Okay.
Okay.
Now let's do this lever one. Take a minute to familiarize yourself
Yeah,
with
I'm trying to remember now. So I just pop that down and then
You gotta pull down. No, you gotta pull out like the SKS.
What?
You gotta pull it away. No, you flip the lever.
Okay.
And now you got to pull it away.
Oh, and then it locks in.
Because that's something that tabbed it. Now, when you flip the lever, see?
Oh, that lever, I forgot it has a lot of wear.
So now that you know the trick, let's do that again quickly.
Okay.
Oh, the lever's gone 180 for some reason.
Oh, maybe I shouldn't do this one.
Pinch
myself.
Okay, now deploy quickly. It's all right. It's a fight.
Okay.
Hurry, it's a fight.
Lever locked. Wait, it's actually, hold up, it's in a lock position now. Okay, now wait.
You're supposed to be hurrying. We're going to die.
Hold on, bro. Don't shoot me yet. Let me just, okay, it's locked.
The fouling problem must have been very significant for that to be the improved version of this. That's all I'm saying.
I mean, but this is, you have to admit, pretty ridiculous in that there's no way this was the case.
You're not all the way in. Yeah, see?
There we go. Okay.
There
we go. Okay. Now, here's my thing. This is after how many years this has been out for that?
Surprise attack. Do it again.
No, I'm not doing it again. I'm not pinching myself again. Thank you. I'm good.
Yeah, surprise attack for this is like, let's go.
Yeah, it's still good.
I mean, you can just... most of your struggle was the fact that it was way up on arm's reach because you got it on your lap.
And the lever just kept trying to twist around and do a bunch of different hokey pokey style stuff.
Yeah.
But no, it doesn't feel like an improvement. I'm not gonna lie.
No.
Especially, well, I know it's wear. It has to be wear. I'm sure pristine. It worked great. But you know what wear does not.
My suspicion is, because they said that there's not actually an excuse given for why other than just not reliable enough.
Yeah.
My suspicion is you have to pull this set of latches. Inside there's a recess for them to travel in. I've seen this before. We actually had this with the Winchester 1895 lever action rifle where the whole gun was jammed up because mud got behind one spring plunger. And that was part of the safety locking system. And so I had to very carefully pull that gun apart and blow pins and everything to get enough room to barely get that plunger out. And even then when I got it out, there's no way to get a hold of it. So I had to kind of thwack into it to get some compression to get it to drive itself loose enough.
Sure.
It was a huge nightmare to get this one spring and plunger out. And then once the mud was out of it from behind, the gun started working perfectly. This is sort of that same thing, although thankfully it does have a cross screw. But once you get anything behind this sort of plunger,
I can imagine operating it would become...
There'd be no way on earth short of getting the screwdriver out to get your bayonet disengaged to then re-engage it.
Right.
And so, and you can't compress mud. I mean, it's like hydrolocking an engine. So I understand why they needed to get away from the system if that's what happened. I mean, my number one instinct is that must be what happened.
Right.
The result, though, the first thing to come around, this sort of lever, which frankly works on sort of a lobe in there.
Yeah. Not great.
No. So very interesting and very World War I.
So the button was the third one you said?
Yes, the button, you just press it, and it's the same thing. You pull out and rotate and you shove in.
Oh, good. Which, simple.
Technically, the pull, rotate, shove is still, I think, inferior in terms of speed to just this. This is...
Oh, yeah, that is rapid deployment.
But I understand that it was less vulnerable to fouling.
Sure.
I think that's really it for the cavalry. Now, overall, on these cavalry models, how would you rate these as a combat weapon in World War I?
Well, if it's long range, I'm definitely going to say not great because with the short barrel, we're losing a lot of powder at the front. Like, it's just... Carcano,
we covered this last time. Bottlenose 6.5 Carcano, not the most effective cartridge at long range.
No.
Shed more of its velocity, and I wouldn't want to do a lot of mountaintop fighting with this.
No. However, in the trenches, short range with 6 rounds, not too bad. I mean, I would have to be concerned.
Bayonet is always there.
Oh, yeah, bayonet always ready to deploy, hopefully. Hopefully it does deploy and undeploy. However, it is a little bit worrisome of still having the exposed bottom with all the mud and muck in the trench you would encounter.
Again, I really wish they had just done like the Germans and just put a popper outer in there.
That would have been very confidence-inspiring. But still, not too bad. At least I got 6 rounds, which is still really impressive for a bolt action. Normally, you only really get 5.
The only downside in that regard is the sort of, at most, half-length handguard, but for a lot of war, no handguard. That's really it in terms of, because you might get a burned hand. Well, I'm in the middle of a fight anyway. But
maybe I'm wearing gloves, hopefully.
I will say in terms of, yes, it's kind of grindy and stuff, but it's not like it's not rapid. You could run this bolt pretty quickly, except for the part where you got to go find that trigger every time.
Right.
So if it were a rear action set split bridge and it dropped us right at the bolt, that would be a huge improvement.
Yep. If they had a semi-pistol grip, that would be even better for guidance.
Right. But it's kind of interesting. by the time of World War One, these cavalry carbines are extremely short because you see this, standard short rifles like the Springfield 1903 or short magazine Lee Enfield. Then you see the Germans who come around to the Kar 98A because their original
the
Kar
Kar
98 was too short and stubby, and they need to extend it for the Spitzer cartridge.
Mm-hmm.
Italy never went to a Spitzer cartridge, and even if they did, it's little old 6.5. They just stuck with their original pre World War One. That's almost archaic in terms of its length.
And it went to World War II.
Yeah, that's true. But actually kind of turned out to be an advantage if you think about it in terms of close combat fighting, because you end up with a very short, very handy carbine.
Yeah.
And the 6.5 Carcano is perfectly effective at those
I
ranges.
still do wish that they had made that bayonet a little more useful as a tool as well as for stabbing, because don't get me wrong, good for puncture, but I'm thinking about because bayonets being used as actual tools for maybe cutting barbed wire and things like that.
Oh yeah. But to be fair, this wasn't really much of a trenched gun. We're actually kind of talking about what ended up being the TS's intended role.
Okay.
So that
we can navigate over that. Then.
Being able to have a regular bayonet lug also gives you the options to mount things, whereas clearly this is not easy to mount stuff too.
This is meant for you to have everything at once. This is supposed to be your Swiss Army knife.
It's an all-in-one cavalry carbine. It was supposed to be for mounted troops originally, and then it expanded to some others. But in terms of being a cavalry gun, when the cavalry wasn't expected to be in long engagements or long-range engagements, it makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah,
I actually quite like this gun. I really have an affection for it.
It's very compact.
But let's talk about the TS now.
Sure.
Because the difference between the TS and that, I'm going to tell you right off the bat: full handguard, full-length stock. And then as it was conceived of, it had a bayonet that you would push on one side and then rotate and click into place, which we unfortunately don't have an example of.
Sounds weird. Why?
Presumably, there was a fear of it being yanked off the gun in close quarters combat.
That would certainly lock it in.
Yes. The way to remove a bayonet from regular Carcano, 1891 long rifle, would be a side button on the pommel. So in theory, I guess, if you just sort of grabbed it and pulled, it would come off. Okay. I'm not sure why there was so much fear of someone doing that.
Did someone they had Timmy in the front lines, they accidentally handed off to somebody, I guess. I mean,
it's either that or there was some fear of damage to the nose cap. I'm not really sure what was going on.
How bizarre. But I can't
because
argue
there's another change I should point out. I don't know if we made it clear enough. The lug for this one is linear towards the muzzle, and it's just sort of milled into the bottom of this forward barrel band.
Sure.
That one is a separate piece on a rotating yoke with a key that sort of sets inside the barrel band so that it can't, wiggle around.
Right.
But it is a separate part. It's yoked around the barrel band, and it's frankly much sturdier than this from both linear.
Effectively just take that screw out right there and you can remove it?
Yes.
Okay.
And it's much more sturdy from both linear and lateral blows.
Sure.
So it is a stronger mounting system. It's just, I wonder what the heck happened that they felt like they needed
them to make that choice.
Yeah, all out.
It's something very specific did happen.
And then the button release for it is linear to the rear, so you have to pull back on it, like pulling on a pinball machine. You have to pull it back to rotate out. And so if you're a guy getting stabbed by it, the idea that you would grab a nubbin on the back and push towards your enemy.
That's the direction you would push towards.
No, you'd push the whole thing off.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't push. You wouldn't be looking for a button and pushing it out while pulling the other thing towards you. You're not going to be like, ah. Whereas just
Chinese finger trap.
Whereas just grabbing and pulling, it might come off. But boy, that's a really specific use case. But I guess somebody really got it done.
Yeah, I guess so. Seems overly complicated, and it would have taken too much money to take the time to really make. But I guess it really worried the Italians enough that they spent extra time and money into developing.
Well, by the end of the war, they were done with that. By the end of the war, they're like, who cares about that one specific use case? We need to make one bayonet that we can issue everywhere, which is how this gun ultimately changes.
Okay.
But at this time, weird bayonet. How's the handling? I mean, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, it's exactly the same except for that fore end. Although that's stiff.
Yeah, no, it's a lot really not different there.
A lot, not really not.
No, nothing's really different. I mean, I've got extra fore end and presumably, the whole different setup with the bayonet itself, but still straight wrist, still carbine, still open bottom, same action, safety.
Same length of barrel,
rear
same sight.
Yeah, there's no difference on that one.
If you're bayonet fighting, which would you rather have?
What kind of bayonet fighting?
Well, I had a knife style bayonet.
I kind of like the knife style bayonet better.
You also get to have a knife when you're not
I
using it
kind
as
of
a
like
bayonet.
the extra tool. I will say that. Now, I mean, I guess if I'm trying to think of it in terms of just the environment in general, this one probably yes. But if I'm going further distance for long periods of time, I might actually really prefer the cavalry.
Ever so slightly less weight on the original cavalry versus the original TS.
Yeah.
But you do get more handguard for bayonet fighting.
Right, which is very convenient considering now I actually am going to have the knife.
Also, if
bayonet.
you're doing any kind of shooting and moving, having to grab hot barrel, even with the other handguard like that one, you got a pretty good chance of accidentally grabbing hot barrel with this gun.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Shooting and moving. Or if you throw it on your
You got
back
about
or something,
half
it
a
hits you in the
chance
neck.
right there, yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of heat protection, superior.
Oh, absolutely.
Not a lot of weight difference to get
Can't
that.
argue with that.
Realistically,
anything else different?
No, you know what the major difference is, honestly? During the war, especially, but not so much with people's collections now.
What?
This one was side slung, that was underslung.
Oh, yeah. You're not wrong.
And so...
I don't think of sling swivels because we don't really do any carding with them.
No, that's the one thing we don't test. However, when you throw that on your back, and the Dutch had this problem and it was wearing into their uniforms and stuff, they put the wood piece.
Would really wear onto your back.
Well, it doesn't go on your back. Since it's an underslung gun, that's going to go over your shoulder, and that magazine's going to hit you right in the lower rib. Over and over
that would
and over
suck.
again. Yes.
So bad.
Yes.
No.
So...
yeah, no. Traveling, that's my buddy.
Also, if you're doing anything with your hands, it's going to be like a purse trying to come off.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be awkward,
arm.
yeah.
Because it's set up like an infantry rifle, which the infantry is supposed to be either fighting with it or not fighting with it. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're doing artillery or anything else, actually having on your back's better. And Italy would eventually, like we covered, move away from this. They'll move to side sling and then both under and side sling.
Right.
But I will say, despite the advantages, like I do not think I need to have an integrated spike bayonet in this war. I would prefer to have a knife bayonet.
Same.
I would prefer to have more handguard for handling my rifle. However, when we stop and think about slings, it gets a little iffy as to whether or not I would actually drop both of those features just to make sure that I don't have my ribs being battered to death.
And that, yeah, longevity-wise, you're handling it a lot better.
Yeah, that's pretty iffy.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess it really just depends on how much toting you're really doing.
In terms of actual trench fighting, which would you pick between these two? Not marching, just fighting.
Yeah, just actual infantry. Like a fight right there in the trenches itself.
Yeah.
I'd probably still pick this one.
I would too. Handguard and bayonet.
Handguard. Honestly, that's really just the handguard. If I even discount the bayonet for a second, the possibility that I'm going to be needing to hold it just to make sure I'm not getting overheated all the time would be really convenient.
Being able to swing it like a club if you need to.
Yeah.
I agree. And then, I mean, neither one of them is great for super long range.
No.
You know, they're both okay for moderate range. It's certainly, at the fighting distances we tended to actually see, they both did a good job.
Sure.
I will say as a collector, though, which one is your favorite?
That one.
Me too.
Cavalry. It's just got different lines to it. It's got a sleekness to it that nothing else really kind of on the table has.
I genuinely love the vibe. I actually, these guys are so inexpensive, I just own them. This is
for a long time.
This is one of my favorite things I think that we've turned up in recent years, just because I found one without the handguard. It's all, all the early features, and I just genuinely like it.
They're also cheap.
It looks cool this way to me. I don't know why I have a thing for like early half stock cavalry guns where there's like no handguard, well in this case they did have a bayonet weirdly, but many of them don't have bayonets. You know, just cut the band right off there.
Right.
I don't know why I'm just like. Yeah, okay. Like this is what I'm into.
It looks like they were going for something, and it did not quite work out. But you know what? They did it anyway.
Unfortunately, it's very difficult for me to shoot this.
Yeah.
I can't. They were trying to tuck the chicken wing, and it actually pushes the gun up. So
so you have to actually wing it.
It's so difficult to get behind.
Just sore. That's pretty much it, I think, for everything. Do we have any executive producers for this episode?
I don't believe so, actually.
Okay. No Carcano takers. What's up with the no love for Carcano?
Yeah, what's up with you guys? But I love the Carcano.
Absolutely do, yeah.
I have a much deeper respect for it after doing more research and really comparing it to its contemporaries. I think the Carcano, like we said in the 1891 episode, smart rifle for a very brief window.
Very, very brief, unfortunately.
And then, unfortunately, a lot of its best features were just immediately overlapped.
Yeah.
And then the one, sort of the remaining feature that it had that was good is that it was light. And it works.
Still simple.
Right. Light, simple, cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And not just cheap, but domestically producible in Italy.
In-house.
In-house. Italy didn't have to send out to other people.
Impressive.
And therefore, it did it. I don't think, Italy's had its troubles with world wars.
Sure.
There's not...
It's had its troubles.
Italy's never been all that confident in warfare, mostly because at various times, I don't think half the population wanted to be in it or out of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But if we look at Italy's problems in the war, I don't think you could blame them on the design and implementation of the Carcano itself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see the problems in this rifle that are actually fairly minor when you think about it. I don't see them being the reason Italy actually suffered a defeat at any one time. I think there's many other reasons that Italy had issues.
That's fair.
I just love it. I don't know why. It's such a mix of old and new world. It's sort of the last of the black powder single shots merged with the first of the repeating smokeless rifles aesthetically.
And then it's such an unfortunate story that it went so far, at least attempted to, and then just fell short.
That's okay. We can still love it for trying as hard as it did.
Yeah, it did. We appreciate that.
All right, y'all. We'll catch you next time.
Night, everybody.
Whenever Wilfred Brimley the cat managed to sneak by somebody while the fence was down, they'd have to go chasing him around the neighborhood. But normally, he runs, and this apparently he's done it dozens of times, he just runs out, and then Panic runs into the fence and then just stops. And then they just pick him up and bring him in. But the minute the fence was removed, he just kept going, and they're like, oh, we need that fence back. So I forgot I figured that out. When it was all said and done, I was just like, I'm just going to give Thomas the scooter. And you're like, yeah, just give Thomas the scooter.
You thought I might fight you for a second. I went, no, you should absolutely give it to him.
Money's kind of tight right now, so I was like...
That was spent with your personal money, son. That was fine.
So
you burn your personal money.
You say that. We're kind of needing it. So I gave him the scoot. And then he's just like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, okay, I got you.
No.
He fought me for a minute.
No. Let me set this little stage right here real quick. Because you went, there's nothing you can get from me, Tom. There's nothing that you can do that would like trade this up.
I was going to give that to you.
Oh, okay.
I was saying that he fought me on the money part. And then I was like, I'm not going to take it. It's going to be a fight. And he's like, I'll give it to Mae. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And you're like, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. People are like honking their horns and waving out of their windows.
Yeah.
I met a fish pimp. That was a thing that happened.
Yeah, you did meet a fish pimp.
This guy's license plate said fish pimp. We end up next to him in traffic. Well, like kind of diagonal from him in traffic. I'm just sort of looking around traffic and I realize somebody's eyes are on me. Uh-huh. And he's like ahead of us with his neck whipped all the way around to like the 7 o'clock position, trying to look at the scooters, being like, well, it's just me and my buddy. Like we're only two. We're not even like a big pack, right? Yeah. So, like, I see him looking hard at us. So I make the gesture, like, roll your window down. And he's, like, a car length ahead. He's like, dude, those are awesome. And I yell back at him across standstill traffic. It's like, how much is it to F the fish? But I said the word because you don't want to bleep. And he's like, he just looks at me weird. And so I have to repeat it. And now other people are looking, right? Uh-huh. And he goes, oh yeah, you like that license plate? I was like, yeah, that's great. He's like, yeah, my family like distributes like most of the fish in Pennsylvania or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah. He met one of the biggest fish pimps in Pennsylvania.
Pimp. But Fish Pimp was down. Like he liked Scooter Gang. You see this guy? It's not so much a problem taking the gun apart because you just have to go to the rear and she'll slide right out. But when you go to put it together, you got to get this just right. So let me just lift and that falls free. This leaves us with just the inner frame, which, as Ian warned us in Project Lightning, this is very sharp. Do not cut yourself on this. This was